Hello folks, how you doing tonight? I may be a few seconds early, but welcome to another night of Ghost Stories with Spooky Miss T.I. That's me, I'm Spooky Miss T.I. So I hope you all have had a good week. I hope things have gone well for you this week and that you've been as productive as you've wanted to be. I hope that your gardens are sprouting and growing and starting to bear fruit. That's some of the things that I hope. So today, this morning we gathered with some other friends to, maybe before that, how about does everybody have their libation with them? How about we do a toast to Sunday nights? What do you say? To Sunday nights. Cheers. So, as I was saying, today several of us gathered masked at this beautiful place out in the woods to dispatch a dear friend's ashes into the creek on the property where he lived. And going there and walking there, walking down this path, a pretty steep and difficult path, but I made it, down to the creek and this old bridge that friends said that when they first built the bridge you could drive a truck across because he would drive the truck across to get wood. And now it's kind of ramshackle and my friend Joyce said it's kind of a metaphor for Chip. He was sturdy and strong, and it just kind of, shriveled and just became more worn as it made its way into the earth. But standing there amongst all these people and feeling the grief and the loss and also celebrating the impacts that people we love have on us, I could feel him all around that place. I could feel him. I waited till when we were walking back up the hill back toward the house. I hung back because I'm so slow. It makes me nervous to have people behind me because I know I'm keeping them. They're going step and I'm waiting for me to drag myself a little further. Plus, I was able to just walk that path alone. And I could just feel him everywhere in that woods. Not feel him like a ghost present, but just, his ashes had been sent downstream toward Big Blue, toward Lake Michigan, and his essence remained, and his essence remains in his work. He was an artist. It was quite moving, and it made me think about how often when people we love, when our loved ones pass, even if we're not there with them, quite often they'll let us know. A week ago, I just all of a sudden asked randomly, just asked once about him, have you heard anything about Chip? And it wasn't moments later that we heard that he had passed. So sometimes, there's just a quick check-in. Sometimes there's more formidable check-ins. I remember the first time that I experienced this, and fortunately it was amongst many adults. I was 8 years old, and my grandmother was in the hospital, and this was my father's mother, and she lived in the house next door to us, and she had fallen and broken her leg, and when she got to the hospital they found out that she was just suffering. Her pain was not just arthritis, she was just shot through with bone cancer. And so it was just like a vigil waiting for her. And we got picked up from school and brought to her house. And when we got there, I knew something was going on. I knew she was really sick, and my parents weren't there. We never got picked up from school. We always had to walk. But my other grandma picked us up. And we were at Grandma Shipper's house, and all the grown-ups were there. And it was like the Sunday parties that she used to have, where people would come and play cards, and there'd be liquor bottles on the kitchen counter, and people would all have drinks and cigarettes and stand around and laugh and talk and tell stories. But so it was like that, except people were talking, and the booze was present, but it was way more somber. So I knew something was going on. Now, my grandma Shippers, one of her all-time favorite things to eat was chicken a la king out of the can. I kid you not. So she had like always had 4 or 5 cans of chicken a la king in her cupboard. And her kitchen was a lot like my kitchen, with the sink in the window and then the counters underneath and then the cupboards above them. And I was standing there, and then there was a back door just like at my house, and a door down to the basement. But I was standing by the kitchen door, and my Uncle Gerald, I used to wear a ponytail, and he would pull my hair up, so it would pull it out of the ponytail, so it would be like all over the place. And he was just kind of pulling on my hair as I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, a can of chicken a la king just came out of the cupboard and went plunk right on the counter. And one of my great uncles said, "Mark the time, she's dead." And everybody looked at the clock, and we just waited. And that seemed very weird to me, But it wasn't so weird to me because I was growing up with spirits. But 15 minutes later, my mother called and said that it was like, I think it was 6:48 or something was what the clock said. And my mother called and said that Grandma Shippers had passed away. And of course I said, "What time did she die?" Because everyone was waiting to confirm the chicken a la king visitation. And my mom said 6:45, and they said, "You sure it wasn't 6:49?" I said, "Oh yeah, well it was 6:49." And they all went, "Told you." Everybody was, yep. She let us know. And it wasn't, no one was creeped out. People were sad, and there were tears and things, but she just kind of threw a chicken a la king can out of the cupboard to let everybody know she was leaving. So that was my first experience with this. When my other grandma died, I was a young woman, 19, and living in Michigan, and it was in the winter, and I had gone someplace with my friend Laura, and she was driving, and we had to take the highway back, and I don't know where we had been, but it was like whiteout conditions. It was just blizzardy and just snow where you couldn't tell the road from the side of the road, and we were just going, at a snail's pace. And I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I'm watching, making sure that everything's safe. Now, it was a divided highway. It was actually I-96, and or 196, whatever. But she's just driving along, and all of a sudden, I see these headlights coming toward us, like this light, just really bright headlights, like if it was a semi-truck. And I fell back in my seat and said, "Look out," as it got to where right at the car. And as it rushed past, I had a vision of my grandmother's face. And I didn't know that she was, that there was I didn't know that she was close to death, but it was just her face. And when we made it home, as she dropped me off at my apartment, and I got upstairs, and I couldn't get her out of my head, and I sat down with my dulcimer, and I wrote her a song. And right as I finished the song, my mother called and told me that Grammy Ethel had passed away. So she came and let me know she was gone too. She also came because I'd been praying. She'd been in so much pain, and so I'd been praying for her for relief and for her to not linger. And I felt kind of guilty about that. And so I dreamed several nights later, after I got back from the funeral, I dreamed that I went into her her room at the care center where she was, and she was in the bed, but she was sitting up. My grandmother was very, very crippled by the time she passed away. And she looked at me with this bright twinkle in her eye, and her face, she was taking steroids, so her face was really puffy, but it wasn't in the dream. And she looked at me with this twinkle in her eye, and she said, "You thought you could kill me." And I was aghast, that she knew this. She threw the covers off, flung her legs off to the side, and they were perfect. And they weren't scarred and they weren't gnarly. And she stood up and she went like this. And as I looked, she just and was gone. So those were my 2 grandma's visits. I'm sure many of you have had things where people that care about you let you know when their time has come, when they're leaving. And I have a guest here tonight, someone that I know very well, and that many of you will know very well, who has a story to tell where he himself experienced someone who came to him and let him know just after he passed. So I've got Bunsey here. He stayed up late. Took a nap so he could stay up late and be here. Let me turn this if I can without dropping it. Let's see. Can you see Bunsey? Scooch in there, Buns. Let me move this over a little. There he is. Everybody say hi to Bunsey. Sorry, are y'all getting dizzy as I'm wangling this newfangled thing? Yeah. Okay, there's Bunsey.
Well, this happened right in the middle of town at a filling station, Peterson's filling station. I met this 19-year-old kid when I was the coordinator at a men's homeless shelter. This kid had been kicked out of his house by his mother because he wouldn't follow the rules that she had stipulated were the conditions of him staying there. So he broke those, and so she's out. And she had called the homeless shelter to see if there was room, and there was. So we let him in, and for the next several weeks, while he was there, I was there quite often. We would stay up fairly late each evening that I was there, just talking about his aspirations, what he wanted to do with himself, where he'd been, what he'd been up to. And one of the things he felt that he needed to do since he had dropped out of school was he needed to get some kind of certification, GED or high school diploma. And I worked for the Cadillac Area Public Schools at the time, and night school and credit recovery, GED, and so I gathered up materials that I brought to him that he could start on his path for getting his ticket to getting, employment, whatever it may be, but it's something he felt he needed to do. After several weeks, school began again. This was towards the end of summer. And by that time, he had gone home, and I assumed that he could stay at his house. I hadn't seen him. So one evening, I was coming back from work. It was a pleasant evening in early September, and I was bicycling up towards the intersection of Pine Street and Mitchell, Mitchell being the main street on which his filling station was. And I'm waiting for I'm pedaling up, and to my good fortune, the light turned green. I didn't have to get off my bike, so I went through the intersection safely. And just on the other side of the intersection, the front tire hit a pothole, and I felt the edge of the pavement hit the rim of the wheel, and I realized my front tire was low on air. So I took a turn down the alley that went behind the gas station because I knew they had an air hose, and I figured I'd go and put air in the tire. Well, as I was pedaling up the alley, 2 girls came running across the alley and into the adjacent parking lot. And one of them was waving her hands around and screaming, "He kissed me, he kissed me." And I didn't think much of it other than, a couple of young gals just horsing around, whatever it may be. Well, then I came around the corner of the gas station and to go and park by the air hose. And there was this van that it was parked at the corner of the convenience store. Now, I had seen this van when I had crossed the main intersection. It had come up to the stoplight and was waiting there. And I took notice of it because it wasn't a full-size van. It was a sort of one of the shorter vans. And on top of the cab, there was one of those boomerang-shaped antennas, and I could hear the subwoofer of the sound system in the van thumping away. And I assumed, there's kids out and about partying, so and that van was parked at the gas station. Well, I came around the end of the van, and the sliding side door was open, and there was a fella standing outside the van, and another one sitting inside. The fellow standing had a ball cap on, and the way the lighting was, the shadow of the cap covered his face. So I didn't recognize right away who it was, but then I heard him say, "How are you doing, Mr. Bunce?" And it was this kid's voice that had been at the homeless shelter. His name was Rick Tree. And kind of surprised me, and he had been talking with this person who was sitting in the captain's chair in the van. And I went, oh, it looks like you guys are out having a party or traveling with one of the friends, He goes, yeah, we're just out having fun. I said, well, yeah, cool. I haven't seen you in a while. I hope everything is going okay with you. We'll need to get together and find out how you're doing. Okay, he said, And then I continued on past him over to where the air hose was. And as I was taking the air hose to put air in the tire, this one young gal walked right by me, and I assumed it was one of the two girls that had run across the alley into the parking lot squealing. And she was short, wearing blue jeans and a long white boy's shirt. And her face was all flushed like she was been running. And she walked directly over to the fellas who were standing by the van and was talking with them. Well, I continued putting air in the tire, putting the cap back on the valve. And I happened to look up, and I saw another fellow walk out from the convenience store. He was wearing a brown leather jacket, and he had reddish hair. It was fairly bright light, so I could tell that. And he was tapping a pack of cigarettes in his hand, the way they do. And he went over to the van and climbed in the driver's seat. Well, I figured, there's the party right there. Now, at that point, it would have been easier for me to have gone back around the van and out onto Nelson Street to head home, but for some reason, I didn't want to do that. So I went out the entryway of the gas station off of Main Street and turned onto Pine, and then turned again onto Shelby, and I came up to the intersection of Shelby and Nelson. And the van, this was a matter of, not even a minute. And the van was coming up to that intersection and turned the corner, and as they went by me, I heard a voice of one of the girls inside saying, "Have fun, Mr. Bonds." And I go, oh, Rick must have told him who I was, And I continued on home, went through the intersection, continued on home. Now, and that was it for the evening. So it was the next day that I was T.I. was driving me to work. And she mentioned to me, she says, did you hear that Rick Tree's mother called me last night and said Rick Tree had died yesterday afternoon. And that puzzled me because I said, no, how could, what do you mean? I talked to Rick at the gas station, and as we were going by the gas station, I pointed to him and said, right there. I talked to Rick last night on my way home, which was about 8:45. She said, no. What had happened, he'd been out with some friends in Lake City, which is the county next to ours. And from what I understood, he had been hood surfing something, and fallen off the car and hit his head, got up saying, I'm fine, and then collapsed. And they hauled him over to a house of a friend, called the paramedics. Well, they ended up taking him up to Traverse City, pronounced brain dead, and they had decided to pull the plug on him that afternoon.
Right about 8:45.
Oh, it was right about 8:45. And that was pretty close to the time when I talked to him at the gas station. So apparently I wasn't the only person that Rick had come to say his farewells. He had a girlfriend, and she said that he had come to her that evening as well. And I found this out later when I told Rick's mother what had happened. And she didn't seem at all surprised. She said, yep, that sounds just about right. And then that's when she told me about the girlfriend also having seen Rick. Then in retrospect, I'm thinking about it through the evening, and it's as clear in my mind now as I reported it then. But there were a couple of things that struck me as unusual. One of them was that from the moment I had hit the pothole with my tire, I started having this queasy feeling. Right, not an upset stomach, but tight, feeling kind of pressure, just feeling out of focus, out of sorts. And that feeling continued throughout the entire encounter and was probably the reason why feeling that way, why I decided not to go back around the van, but to go out the main entrance in the opposite direction, just because I was feeling weird. And then the second unusual thing that I recall was that the intersection of Shelby and Nelson, there's a street light there, but in my recollection of this encounter, I don't remember the intersection being lit up. And I don't recall seeing the reflection of any light in the windshield of the van as it pulled up to the intersection and turned the corner. When I got through the intersection, that feeling that I had of being sort of out of focus, hazy, it just vanished. And when I continued home, it was such that I didn't even say anything to T.I. that something was out of the ordinary. Because at that point, there wasn't. All that had happened is that I had encountered a kid that I had spent a fair amount of time talking with, and that's it. And it wasn't until the following day that I found out that what had happened was in fact an encounter with a spirit saying, well, I'm here to see you, but I'm on my way. I'm leaving. So I told this story to my father shortly after that. It was several weeks later. And he, being a good Methodist minister and so forth, this kind of reality didn't interest him at all. He didn't believe in that. However, when I told him the story, he looked at me with this serious look, saying, well, perhaps I'm going to have to rethink what I feel about this. It made an impact on him, because I'm just not making a bunch of hooey that he wouldn't, just for the fun of it.
So you told me something pretty significant about other people in the van, like the kid with the jacket.
Oh, right. When I described the kid with the jacket to Rick's mother, she goes, oh, yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. He was a good friend of Rick's, and he died 3 years prior in some sort of accident. So she says, oh yeah, and he always wore a brown leather jacket. Red hair, yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. So the only thing I could assume at that point is that everybody who was associated with the van, they were all not of this plane. They were in another dimension. They were not flesh and blood. But they sure looked like flesh and blood to me. I had no reason to question otherwise, which gave me a whole new way of wondering when I'm walking through a grocery store, looking down the aisle, somebody just standing there. Are you real? Yeah, because aside from the fact that I couldn't really see Rick's face, it was in shadow. But the girl who walked by me, I could see her as plain as day. I can still see her face, as clear as day. Yeah, haven't seen her anywhere else wandering around, so that's that. Can happen. Things can happen in the strangest places. A gas station in downtown Cadillac. That's where that happened. That's my story.
You're sticking with it?
For now.
Thanks, Bunsey. So, I'm not the only one that spooky things happen to, as you all know, because they probably happen to you too. This is a really common occurrence. I know I'm crooked. No, not crooked.
You're
but
crooked.
The camera's crooked. I have a new rig. And it's
bouncy rig.
Bouncy rig. Thanks, Bunsey.
Yeah.
Good night.
Oh, that's okay. I'm listening.
Okay. He gets up really early because he goes out and works in the garden before it gets hot. Of course, today was a beautiful day. It wasn't hot at all. It was a gorgeous day. We all were talking at Chip's thing that he didn't like the hot, muggy stuff, and it's this one respite day to celebrate him. It was just great. There have been other times when people who just pass go and visit and let other people know. I remember my Aunt Pat said that I think it was when her father died, maybe her mother, the kids were all scattered all over, and everybody heard at the same time this loud knock, this boom, 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 loud knock at their door, like bang, bang, bang at their door, and woke them up, and then another bang, bang, bang. And when they went down there was nothing there. And then in the morning they found out that their father passed, and they all just agreed. They all had that happen, and just matter-of-factly said, yep, that must have been him coming to say goodbye on his way out. when Bunce's sister Sarah passed away a year ago, January, she was living alone, and she had an abscess that went septic in her body, and so she had a full systemic infection. And she didn't show up for work or for her choir, and so there was a wellness check, and she was not well, and got her to the hospital, and so she's in the hospital, and Bunce went down and was there, and I had just gotten back to work. I mean, I had been out the entire year. That was the year of my accident, and I had just gotten back to work. And so I was coming back to work and then going down after work to be at the hospital in Grand Rapids. And she had been unconscious for a very long time. And so she was not really there in her body. It was, this is something else that I've seen, that people who are in a coma or who are close to death and go into that pre-death coma very often don't stick around in their body. I have experienced people passing away, and as everyone is looking at their body, I could see them over by the window. Everybody is, watching them. It's like birth. You count the breaths, and you wait for the next one, and you count the intervals between the breaths, and I could see Grandpa G when he was passing away. We were all in his room, best death ever, and just before dawn, he's just quiet there, and I could see right over here by the window. He was just standing by the window looking back at all of us. And then he was gone. And then Grandma G says, he's gone. And I thought, yeah, he sure is. I just watched him go. You could feel it. You could feel when people leave the room. But that was right there in that room. So after Grandpa G died, we were all there like a week before he passed away in Florida. It was quite the event. All 4 Bunce children and their children all gathered at these cottages at Penny Farms, which was a retirement community, and all these, Rowan and Zach wearing just shorts and no shirts and out playing frisbee in the yard. And so the old ladies would bake cookies and bring them out to the young men who were out playing. It was a wonderful community. They nurtured us and ministered us through Grandpa G's passing. But this was Rachel had to leave the day after we did a service like the day after he died, day or two after he died, and she had to leave by herself. Everybody else was heading back together with each other, and Rachel had to leave alone. And when you don't get to process, this is one of the things with COVID is people can't gather for funerals and hold each other and be there with each other, comforting each other. Even today, we were in the same place, but we couldn't hug each other. We could just be in the same general vicinity. But human beings, we need to connect when we feel that pulling away from us, And so Rach got in her little Saturn, and she was heading up the coast. This was from Florida, from northern Florida, and she was going to go. She had, I think, 12 shows in 10 days leading up to a festival or something, and it was like a pre-festival songwriter thing. I don't know what it was, but she had all these shows all the way from Florida and then up along the East Coast, and she ended up in Maine. But as she was heading north along the coast, she, just thinking about it, and she was listening to music. And one of the things that we did before Grandpa G passed away is he wanted us to, like, he wanted his funeral before he died. He wanted us to share things with him and talk to him and, not tell his impact to him after he was gone. He was really looking forward to us all gathering and listening to us talk about each other and him together. It was his I don't know what the word is, death funeral, whatever, but Rachel had brought a song that she had been listening to. I don't remember the band, The Long Journey Home, and she wanted to play it for him. And the day that he passed away, the day that he died, was the day she had brought the song in, but that was also the day that he slipped into the coma. And so instead of playing a song, we all stood around and we sang, and boy, those Bunces can sing, I'll tell you what, and all their offspring. And we just sang and sang and sang for hours, one song after another, until finally Grandma G told us, okay, that's enough, we all need to be quiet now. And we just did. So Rachel was never able to play that song for him. So she's driving up, and she comes up a hill, and the Chesapeake Bay is off to her right as she's heading north. And this flash of light, like you come up over the hill and the sun is up there. So it you know how when you're coming up and all of a sudden it catches your car and it's like, whoa, your car just fills with light, and the song was on. And she said all of a sudden her car just filled with light, and she knew that Grandpa G was there with her. And she pulled off to the side of the road, just right pulled off, and sat there as the song finished and just felt him there with her. And she just wept. And after the song had finished and the light faded from within her car, she called me up and she said, Mama, she said, I get it now. And you've heard me say this many times. These are Rachel's words. She said, first we're here, then we're everywhere. And she felt he knew that she wanted to hear that song. And so he sat there in the car with her and listened to The Long Journey Home. And she felt really comforted by that. First you're here, then you're everywhere. You can go anywhere. And it's like, imagine what you could do without your body. And people that die suddenly, without any awareness of what's happening, that don't have that death process, like a bam, you blow you up, you're dead, are all of a sudden without their body. And or people that die from a drug overdose, where they're not in their right mind when they pass, or where they're just like not able to feel that transition, are kind of at odds, trying to figure out what's next, what do I do next. And will very often sometimes stick at the place where their body is, and sometimes go from place to place, to people, to person, and people get an inkling of that person nearby, even if they're not aware of their passing. I think this is part of the process. I've seen this so much that I'm really thinking this is part of the process. So I don't know. I'm not sure who I'll go and visit. But I started to talk about Sarah. And so as I was driving down to Grand Rapids, this is very disjointed, I'm all over the place. As I was driving down to Grand Rapids, it was winter, January, ice storms, like winter storm warnings all over Iowa, and I'm driving down. And I'm white knuckling it down 131. And I just keep getting this image of her. And I see her in this like fog. And then I don't see her, I hear her. It's like she's moved into this fog. And now I'm driving and it's snowing and it's hard to see. So it's like she's off in there somewhere. And I'm trying to pay attention to driving, but in my mind, I'm hearing her calling me. And then I'm trying to keep track of the road, and she is calling to me. And I said, I hear you, out loud. I'm alone in the car. I said, I hear you. Stay there. You're safe there. I'll be there soon. Just stay where you are. It's okay. And then I heard another voice. And the voice that I heard was Grandma G, was her mother. And it was calling her. And in my mind's eye, I saw Sarah turn and disappear toward that voice. And then this vision was like gone. It was all in like one quick thing. And I thought, oh my God, I hope I'm not too late. And so I got to the hospital, parked, got in, and I wasn't too late. And I was able to talk to her while she was there. She was in and out of the room. She was in and out of her body. She was not always right there. And David's younger sister, Laurel, came, and Anjali was there, and Krish, the whole family was there. And then I went back home. Did I go back home? Yeah, I went back home again. And then I came back the next day, and there was like ice storm warnings. And we were in the hospital, and I wasn't gonna stay. I didn't have anything to change into. I was planning on going home so I could work another day because I'd used up all my sick time with my accident. And I got in the car and started to head home. And there was this ice everywhere. And I got not very far. And I just kept hearing my name being called, like behind me, just calling me behind me. And it was Sarah calling behind me. And so I said, screw this. I'm not driving in this. If I get a docked day, I get a docked day. And I got off the highway and I came around and went right back. And then that night, we all hung out there and in the hospital room. And there was a hospitality room that folks had, and the others hadn't slept at all. So David and I decided to stay that night. And I sat up and let him sleep a little while because we wanted to have somebody keep vigil, And so he was on that really comfortable Naugahyde fold out over under the windows, and I was sitting in this rocking upright chair right by her bed. And as I was sitting there, I again saw that foggy place, and I again heard her call my name. And I was sitting right there. I said, I'm right here, it's okay. And by that point, the doctors had told us that there was just really little hope that even if she survived, the amount of time that her brain had been without oxygen would leave her in near vegetative state. And so that afternoon, folks had decided to remove the ventilator and just let nature take its course. And so that it was removed, and she seemed much more comfortable. She was very agitated with the ventilator, but so I was sitting there and I could hear her call me. I said, it's okay, Grandma G's there. And I heard her again, and I heard her say, Sarah, Sarah. And her voice sounded so young. And as I just kind of closed my eyes and visualized this scene that was in my mind. And I saw Grandmagie come out of the fog and Sarah come up and stand next to her. And then the two of them turned around, and as they turned around, all of a sudden Sarah was like a little girl about 7. And Grandmagie looked like she was in India. And they walked off into that fog holding hands. And I just said goodbye. And off they went. And then, still listening to the breathing, but I knew she wasn't there anymore. You just feel she wasn't there anymore. And then Bunsey woke up, David woke up, and he said, you should lie down a little while. And I said, I probably should. You know, I'd been teaching, and it had been rough. And so I went and I laid down on the cot, and it was not 3 to 4 minutes when he came over and he said, hey, her breathing has changed. And I popped right up and went over. And when you have been at the bedside of someone who is dying, Ruth Ann calls it that good work. There are things that happen all the time, and I recognized that, and I said we had better call the others who had gone to the other room to sleep a little while, and so we made the call, and we both stood there on either side of her holding her hands, and she just left. She just took her last breath. She didn't leave fully because I felt her. Others felt her. Era felt her. Anjali, her daughter. Still, I mean, we still feel her. But she was so confused. She didn't know what had happened. And she was like, what happened to my body? What happened to my body? And so on the altar that Chip made for me, I lit a candle and I sat it there at that thing, and I said, stay by the light as long as you need to. But you know how to go. You already did. And it's okay, and everything will be okay. And stay here till the candle goes out if you want. But you can also just go. And each night I would just sit up there by that lit candle. Yes, I keep candles lit. I put them in a safe thing, so... But then she just kind of peacefully left. But she was around a lot. I don't know if Anjali's listening, but she still is. I mean, you can still... She shows up at all kinds of things. I don't think the people who pass are with us all the time, you know, like watching our every move. But I think they're available to us. And they check in, and they just, you know, make sure we're doing okay. Or they're there when we're not doing okay, and can, you know, be there for us. When my mother passed away, we had decided that, well, I gotta tell you, we called Granny Lazarus. I'm pouring a little bit more here. Because she was, like, practically pronounced dead multiple times. And what would happen, one time she had emboli, pulmonary emboli, we called it clot fest. But all 10 of us came from all over where we live in the country, because the doctor said, you need to gather everybody here. She's not going to make it. This had happened before. She also had sepsis, and they said, you need to get everybody here because she's not going to survive this. So this happened that time, and then this happened the second time. And what happened was when we would all gather there, she would be like, you know, the last time it was like her fingers were blue, you know, she was no pulse in her extremities, and they said she is hours from death. You know, she had no kidney function. And so all of us gathered in her room, all of her children, and we sat there and we just talked and we sort of laughed together, and we talked to her, and she was conscious, but she was, you know, kind of a little loopy. Granny was loopy for several years. But she rallied, and her body just kicked back in and started working again. Now, I'd read this article, and this is pretty fascinating. It's there was some research on fetal cells. When a woman carries a fetus, the cells from that fetus remain in her body forever, the rest of her life. And there was a researcher that was watching those as women aged, and all the way women well into their 80s, and these fetal cells from, 60 years prior were still present in their bodies. And what this researcher found was at first to him very disturbing, the team, very disturbing, because there were women who had tumors, and they found that these fetal cells were like in large amounts around these tumors. And at first he thought, oh geez, I wonder if this is causing the tumors. And with further research, what they found was that these fetal cells were actually blocking the spread of the tumor and were protecting the mother's body. How about that? So even if you lose a child, for whatever reason, their cells are still in your body. They're always there. So my thought, and I told my siblings this after 3 times when my mother became, as a matter of fact, when my father was dying, my mother was in ICU when we were at his wake. They told us that it was hours before she would pass, and I told all my cousins, keep your week clear because we're going to be back. But we were all there, and she rallied. So I had this theory that when we all gathered together with her, it's sort of, how you have this cellular connection? And I wonder if perhaps when we were all there, it somehow activated all our fetal cells in my mother. Now remember, she had 10 children. 10. And so when all 10 of us were there, the fetal cells from all 10 of these children, my theory, rallied to bring her back from the brink multiple times. So after my father passed, and my mother's, her quality of life was, not so good. And she was, once again, she was in hospice, and we knew she wouldn't live very long, and some of my siblings were there with her, and they said, she's not going to last long if you want to come. And so some of my sisters and I talked and said, maybe we shouldn't all come. Maybe some of us should be there with her. And what if the others of us stay in our own place and light a candle and call her out? So that's what we did. I remember this day, Bunce and I played a show down in Fiddle Scouts in Lansing, and she was just slipping in and out. She was not going to last 24 hours. And we were talking about her on the way, and I could just sense her. I could just feel her like, like skin on my own body. She was right there, part of me and with me, that whole drive back. And as soon as I got home, right here in the living room, I sat down and I sent messages to my sisters, who we were all lighting the candles. And I said, okay, time to light our candles. Let's call Mom out. And I sat down and lit the candle. And I called to her. I said, come on, Mama, don't stay in that body. Come out where you could be with all of us at once. And I don't think I had that candle lit for 10 minutes before she gave up the ghost. So not so to speak, gave up the ghost literally and passed away. And the ones who were there, I'm so grateful they were there with her, and such comfort to her, and such a gift to them to be there with her. And I think it was a really good idea for some of us not to go and ignite all our fetal cells to go to fight for our mother's body. When we were kids, we were a formidable force. We stuck together. I remember when we moved out to the burbs, we were like those wild children from the city, you know. We were always dirty. We hung together, and we were, you know, that feral gaggle of kids. And my littlest brother, Pete, had eczema on his face. And one of my younger sisters had taken him in the stroller to the park. And there were some kids in the park who started making fun of the baby in the stroller. My little sister was furious about this. She first of all told this kid in no uncertain terms what she considered him to be. And these other kids, there was like this little group of like 3 or 4 kids, and she's alone with the baby stroller. So we're in the backyard. She's got the baby in the stroller, and the park was like a block away. And she's running full speed, pushing this stroller with the baby. I mean, and you know, these are strollers in the 60s, and there was no strap. That if she hit a bump and that thing went flying, there would have been a concussion, if at the very least. She comes running and takes a shortcut through the boom 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 as the bushes, and we're all out in the yard. And my cousins were there, who were also shippers. And she told the story about these, and she actually used the assholes word. She was, I think, 8. Over in the park, that were making fun of Pete. And we were like, let's go get them. And so this whole group now, my cousins, there were 6 of them, and there were 10 of us, but I think there were only about 8. Well, I don't think Kate came with. Maybe she did, but all the rest of us. So you're talking about well over a dozen kids, balled up fists. And we're marching down that street, and we're going, shippers are great, because we all couldn't say our R's. So shippers are great, shippers are great. And we went to that park, and Colleen pointed to, or Annie, whoever it was pushing the stroller, pointed to the kids that had been making fun of Pete, and we just ran at them. And those kids saw us coming. It must have looked like the thundering horde coming to sack Rome, because we were going to beat the crap out of those kids. And they just ran, and they ran across the street, and they ran off, and they left the park, and we never came to blows, but we chased those kids off, and we're sure we taught them a lesson about picking on shippers. So I pictured all our fetal cells in my mother's body as it was shutting down, rushing toward the failing organs, yelling, shippers are great, shippers are great, shippers are great, and running in to rescue my mother. And that's why she kept coming back from death's brink. Lazarus, So that's why we didn't go. We didn't want to, we wanted her to have a chance to go. She's still here. We're all still here and there and everywhere. Thank you for those wise words, Rachel, and that, you know, poets experience the same lives we all do. They just know how to express them, and that was what Rachel did. So whenever you see me write that, you know now where that came from. Okay, well, holy moly, it's been another hour. Wowzers. Next week, I am not positive I'm going to be able to do this next week. We're going up north to the lake. We're going to hunker down there. Don't worry, we're not like going on vacation and going go-karting or anything. We're taking our same COVID group and gathering together up north where Evelyn used to be. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. We're traveling on Sunday. I'll, of course, be there by then, but I'm not sure if I can do Facebook Live without Wi-Fi. I probably can. If I can, I will. I hope I can, because there will be another guest if we can do that. And if not, I will. So watch. What I'll do is I will wait till I get up north next week on Sunday and see if I can access Facebook and try to pull off a Facebook Live, figure out a way to do that. And if I can, I will send out an event notice to everybody. If I'm not going to be able to, I will just post. Maybe I'll make that an event too, because I don't know if you guys see the events or see the posts. I'll make an event saying no ghost story with Ms. T.I. tonight if that doesn't work out. But boy, I hope it does, because I'm going to be with somebody who's got some really good stories. So anyway, thanks for listening. Remember, we're all in this together. Starting tomorrow in Michigan, everybody has to wear a mask. And everybody should have been wearing a mask before this. Kids want to go back to school. Teachers want to go back to school. But we're not willing to risk our children's lives or the teachers' lives for this. This has to turn around for that to be able to happen. So be safe, be smart, and remember, we're all in this together. We're a community. And when we look out for one another, I don't care what divisions have been created. This is life or death for all of us. This is about each other's health. This isn't about policy or politics or isms at all. This is about doing what's right to keep each other alive, right? So our kids, our young people, our old people, all of us, right? All right, I've gone over and I've preached too much. Be kind to yourself. This is rough. Be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself. Be kind to others. And hopefully, I'll see you next week. Bye, friends.